Dude, party at Clint's house. Your backyard is awesome. Between your deck being a tee pad to a field and the bouldering wall, I am in. Yeah, that's a gorgeous location and a very cool backyard. Okay, so operating on the assumption that you're a climber, that's a significant portion of why you're picking this stuff up so quickly, because climbing is a balance sport. Disc golf is actually a balance sport too, the driving part of it, anyways, at least. So that makes sense. So I'm going to kind of dive into balance mechanics a little bit more aggressively than I might with players who are newer who don't have a lot of experience in a balance sport. Again, working on the assumption that you're a climber. So let me know if that's totally wrong. But first, this clip. First thing I'm seeing is, so this is a thing that happens. Like, I totally get it. That's just the way our brains work. But you're looking down at the ground, like you're very clearly focusing on what your body is doing, and then you do look up at the target. That's great. But on the X step, right there, your head started turning back. So there's no reason for your head to turn back until like here, where your shoulder, your throwing shoulder, starts pushing your chin back. And then your head comes through with your shoulders. So let me just demo what I want you to do instead there as a start. This is Shadow the dog. He likes to help me coach by being in the way. So you're turning, you're allowing your head to turn backwards too early on the X step. More on that later. And then you're reaching back. Don't step on the dog. And then when you pull through, your head stays locked with your shoulders. It's working out okay for you. You're throwing pretty well. But back to the balance focus thing, we want to start to use your head to establish a center point in the throw. So it's not that I'm taking my whole body and throwing the disc with my whole body. The new mentality that I want you to start thinking about is you're stopping everything behind your front leg, and you're creating a central axis of breaking lights of pivot that happens all in one spot, right? All right here. So it's not that I'm taking everything with me and throwing forward. You're not doing it anywhere near that bad, but this is like a big paradigm shift that makes all the balance stuff make sense. So I'm really generating momentum, stopping it behind this front leg, and all the rotation happens on one spot, boom, right here, and then my arm slings out on top of that. So that's the new idea. What it's going to look like in your head is you're going to sight, you're going to come back to your address position, you're going to go through your walk up, you're going to be walking sideways. The throw is sideways, the walk up is sideways. You're turning a little bit too far backwards. More on that later. So sight, come in sideways. The only thing that takes your eyes off of the target is that, your shoulder. Like, if I could be in two places at once, I would do that. Given that I can't, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe even picking up center point is more important than that. I'm on my target. My shoulder brings my eyes back, so my head is about 90. My shoulders are ideally past 90, but I'm still looking at a point over there, kind of a soft eyes feel, not glaring at it. Then as my brace foot really engages and my body starts to come through, my head stays on that point. So my center point stays here. The only thing that brings my eyes back to target is this guy coming and lifting me up. So a whole thing, sight, find your target, stay sideways, break target contact, pick up a point on the ground 10 feet off the tee pad, stay on that point, off arm follows through and lifts your head back up. That's the new head movement ideal. That will help center everything in your throw and establish a lot more balance. So that's the first change. Back to your clips. Okay, next idea. So you're well, first of all, footwork is really pretty good. Besides a foot placement issue. So, I mean, it's okay. It's okay. So if you just do the head movement change, then I might be okay with this foot placement. Let me make sure you understand what I mean. So this foot is on about a 45. What I will usually cue new players to is to try to keep that foot on a 90 with the goal of not having the eye line go backwards too early. The eye line goes backwards, the shoulder line goes backwards, the hip line goes backwards. And they are going to go backwards, but not this early. And that's a lie, because they are going to go back that early. Not this early. Yeah, I mean, you're not bad. You're not bad. Yeah, so I like your footwork. There's some nuance that we need to add to it. That's not bad. So grain of salt with that. Conceptually, I want you to be aware of those suggested changes, but really it's fine. But we'll get to what's not totally groovy yet on the next video. But one thing to help with that mental shift, flip back to demo mode, is you can look at Paul Macbeth throwing, and he does this little thing with his front arm where whatever siding routine you need to do, and then he goes initial step, and then the disc and his X step foot are tied together, and they both go forward together. So as he does his X step, he will float the disc forward. It helps set up timing. It can make it easier to adjust your timing. Your timing is fine for now. But what this helps do is if I step too big or allow my toes to turn back too much, my shoulders and my head turn back. If I pump the disc forward from here, see how it unwinds some of that? So cross-body tension and climbing, right? This foot goes behind, this arm comes in front, and I'm bringing cross-body tension in. So I'm just using the disc to keep me from turning here, right? This feels natural. This does not feel natural. So I'm just intentionally putting a little bit of pivot this way in my shoulders to counteract the pivot in my hips wanting to turn back. So that's all that is, what it looks like. Watch Paul Macbeth. He's a little better than me. Not by much, just a little bit. Looks kind of like that. Just swinging these two together, and then start your wind up to coil from here. So then this foot and the disc are tied together, and they go opposite, so that you can control when the disc gets to the back. So that's the basics of a pump. Play with that if you want to, up to you, just an idea. Okay, so next idea. This setup looks good. It then morphs a little bit to not perfect. So now, in this frame, you have an issue that I refer to as short leg, long leg. And I've exaggerated my lines here a little bit just for the purpose of illustration. But the length of your legs between the ground and your hip socket determines the shape of your triangle here. So what you have is short leg in the front, long leg in the back. A couple frames ago, you had that the other way around, which I like better. So even further back than that. So here I like this shape better because you have a longer leg. Yeah, your heel isn't down yet, but let's pretend that's not happening. So here you have a shorter leg in the back and a longer leg in front. I like that better. What we want to end up with around like here when your brace really engages, when your heel is really down. What we want to end up with is a long leg that's really set up at an angle to contain the front hip, stop the forward progress of the front hip. And then we want a rear leg that's short and has a bend like this in it. So this allows, so your rear leg is pretty neutral. And the stick figure leg that I have drawn here is internally rotated. So the rear hip crease right there would be more closed than yours is. Yours is open. If you were to put your hand in the crease between your crotch and your quad, yours would be pretty open. And the position I'm suggesting here would be pretty closed. So the rear leg being in internal rotation like this, that's the knee going in towards your center line, makes a lot of room in the hip socket for the rear hip to rotate forward quickly. You don't get that because your hip socket is open, your hip crease is open, and the leg is out here behind. So as you go forward, your rear hip can't really move much, or it can't move quickly, and it has to pull this leg up out of the ground. So that's going to make it very slow, right? We'll pop over to demo mode and clarify some of that. So you have this, so hip crease right here, I'm closed into the hip crease. And when I open the toe and open my hips, now I'm open in the hip crease. So when I'm here, I can't drive my hip forward. It feels not great in my hip. I'm at the range of motion that my flexibility allows here. So when my hips go to turn, I have to very slowly pick this up and get it to this position where the hip can come forward, right? So it stops any explosive movement, and it makes my hip rotation slow and gradual, right? We want it quick and explosive. So instead of long leg in the back, short leg in front, also here I can't contain my weight from toppling forward at all. If I switch that and I get a short leg in the back and a long leg in the front, now even just doing a little weight shift, boom, I can shift all, and not even weight shift, that's wrong. Pressure shift, right? If I shift my weight goes to the front, and I have long leg, short leg, bad. I have short leg, long leg, I can shift my pressure, boom, without shifting my weight, right? If I had a scale under my right foot, it would read more than 100% of my body weight when I do that. I can tell you that for sure because this foot comes off of the ground, right? So that's what we want. And the reasons are two. One is containment, getting the front hip to actually stop so that all the rotation can happen on that central pivoting axis that we talked about before. Also, very important for the rear hip motion, when I'm in this position where both knees, both femurs, both hips are slightly internally rotated. This, if you've ever watched boxing, this is Mike Tyson. He's like that almost all the time when he's throwing punches, because he can come into this one, throw from the ground, end up in this one, throw from the ground again. That's what we need to do. We're doing a 1-2 punch from the back leg and then the front leg. So you need both of them. You need both legs really active. People argue about front leg disc golf, back leg disc golf. It's really both leg disc golf. That is the ideal. I don't know why it's so confusing to a lot of people. I do, because it's the most confusing motion that humans can do that I'm aware of. Anyways, this leg needs to be in internal rotation in order for the glute to be able to extend and the hip to be able to come forward. So here, with this knee tilted in, I can drive my hip forward explosively. Boom, I can pop it. Here, I can't. I just can't. Because my skeletal muscular structure doesn't want to do it, because I'm going to pop my hip out. So you really want that shape in both legs, where you can fold into this hip crease and fold into this hip crease. Because you're going to be in this one, stay in this one, transition to loading the front leg, and then this is the magic from this knock-kneed position, all you need to do is extend your front knee, and you get into that position that the pros get into, where your hips are behind your heel, your rotation is on a central axis behind your brace, and then the arm can whip out on its own after that. That's the magic. That's what engaging your hips means. It's not your hips. It's engaging the ground so that they move your hips, right? We'll probably loop back to that later, but real quick demo. This has kind of been making sense to people. Let me know if you like it or not. So hip socket in front, hip socket in back, pelvis, right? Chunk, chunk. A lot of people throw off of their rear leg, which is kind of what you're doing. You're using your front leg, but not the way that we want to yet. Go over that on another video. People tend to drive off of this, float on the front leg, and throw from here. So what they're doing is the front hip socket isn't really doing anything. It's just there, and the rear hip socket is pushing. So you get a little bit of spin. Boom. Because only this is really doing anything. What we want, if we really get that toe down, heel forward, containment, boom, on the front, right? With extension, ideally, you don't have to do that. You are athletic enough, I think it would probably be fine for you. When you get that, you have containment on the front. That's actually going to be a pull backwards of the front hip. You also have the drive from the rear hip. So you get a push and a pull, and you get a ton of spin, right? Because you have 2 legs worth of muscle, both acting on the hips, and you get the rotation to happen around the central axis instead of happening around the front hip axis. And here you're just a door swinging open that's very slow, right? Versus how quick I'm able to spin a 12-pound medicine ball around its center. That's what we're going for. So there's 2 forces. If you look at force plate data of like ball golfers, you'll see a force spike this way from the rear foot, and then a force spike that way from the front foot. They're backwards from us because swinging sports are different than one-arm sports, but you don't care about that. Maybe you do. Okay, back to you. So that's short leg, long leg, and the importance of internal rotation in your rear leg, and the importance of extending your front leg. Okay, so complement mode engage. Your off arm looks very good. Maybe gets a little tiny bit too far behind you, but we're absolutely not worried about that yet for now. Got a pretty solid swim move. Comes in across your body and ends up going backwards. That's lovely. Nice work. Again, balance sport, cross body tension. You got it. Head. We talked about head movement. Okay, now the good stuff. This is the balance stuff. So watch your rear leg. Rear foot comes down. I'll just go frame by frame. So a little too much reach to the plant step and not enough setting up that internal rotation on the rear leg. So your rear leg is static. It's just tipping forward. And if you stayed more aggressively up on the ball of the foot and intentionally rotated that rear knee in a little bit, it doesn't have to be crazy. It's just a little keying that up so that it doesn't have to, your hip doesn't have to pull the leg into internal rotation. So you do end up in internal rotation a little bit. At least your knee comes back to neutral, but it's not happening ahead of your hips. So I probably didn't explain that well enough. So you're ending up, you're neutral, and as you come through, the hip pulls and turns the knee kind of into internal rotation. It's really still neutral. It's just going to behind you, right, as your hip turns. So you'd rather it stay under you more and not end up behind you. And the way we do that is, like, you can find this knock-knee position, so toes in a little bit, and then bring your knees together and kind of set your weight into your knees, and then step forward from there. So you're going to have to wind up a little bit and step forward and see how that wants to just drag. Again, Mike Tyson throwing a sideways hook mode, right? That foot drags so it's still under you so you can do it again if you need to. I used to coach boxing, so that's kind of how my brain thinks. So all you need is a little bit of dip in so that when this hip fires, there's room for this one to come through too. So that's all you need on the rear foot. It's not a huge deal. You just need to be aware that you need to do it. Okay, so but rear foot. Note a little bit of toe drag here. People worry about toe drag a lot. It doesn't really matter. Like the disc is already gone. But it is an indicator of balance. Lost my frame by frame for some reason there. Because I'm pushing the wrong keys. That'll do it. So more internal rotation right about here. I mean, I guess the whole time really. But so just watching the motion of the rear foot. It peels the heel up and then starts to pull straight forward and then toe drags. So the toe drag just tells me you're not getting your weight into your front leg enough. Excuse me. You're not getting your pressure into your front leg enough. So the weight is kind of staying back because there's still weight in your toe. That's why you're dragging your toe to keep your balance. Again, very good balance, just not the type of balance we want. So your rear leg is lifting straight up and moving straight towards your plant foot, and that continues around in an arc because you're stepping forward. That's normal. But what do we want instead? So strap in. This is a big one. How are we doing on time? 20 minutes. Okay, this is going to be longer than it's supposed to be. I'm sorry. I hope you're into that. If not, yeah, we'll figure it out. But I will try to speed up to the rest of my notes. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to throw a little bit more at you than I usually do because it looks like you've got the balance stuff figured out. So quick version of throwing from a Hyzer tilt. So you're kind of, look at your clip one more time. You're kind of throwing, you have a Hyzer tilt in your shoulders. Little bit. Yeah, a little bit. So let's exaggerate that. I'll get you a video on this rather than spending 20 minutes talking about it. Hyzer tilt link. Rather than talking about it for 20 minutes. But what do I need to clarify now? The counterbalance roll of the rear leg. Oh, hi, dog. You're not in the way at all. Don't worry. So the key is, if this is my balance, right, it's going to be dynamic in an actual walk-up, so I'm not going to be standing vertically, but I'm going to be leaned back. The rear leg allows me to counterbalance. So this Hyzer tilt is very important. It's what allows your hips to brace the way that we want them to. If I try to brace with my shoulders and my hips flat and level, it's not going to work. I can't get enough containment. I can't get my rear hip below my front hip. So, hey Shadow, can you move? He says no. Hey buddy, ready? Some food? Let's go. Okay. So, I really want a Hyzer tilt in my hips. This is covered in the video, but basically, when you do this, you end up with your hips. What do I need to be? I need to be here. So I'm throwing this way into the wall. When I step forward the way that we want to, my hips end up on a Hyzer tilt, right? And then I shift my weight into the front, and then I power my brace from the front, and my hips end up on a Hyzer tilt, right? So this plane is Hyzer. So I really want my shoulders and my arm to match that plane, right? So they're coming through together. So that's the quick version. What does that mean for the motion of your rear leg? Your rear leg wants to kick this cone. So if I'm planting here and I'm starting my brace from this position, my rear foot really wants to, as I brace dynamically, I want my rear foot to continue forward and kick that cone. So It's a dynamic version of this position right here. So here I can throw, because there's no forward rotation. Hey pup. There's no forward movement. So I can just balance my rotation. Doesn't matter, right? Very much. Because I'm counterweighted here. If I add a dynamic brace to that, where I'm really stopping force, something has to continue forward. So on this side, what continues forward is my arm and the disc, and then my follow-through shoulder. And on this side, what continues forward is my rear foot moving out to that position, right? Boom. So that provides balance from left to right. So what you're doing is shifting your weight towards the front foot in a way that there's no counterbalance. So you're flat here, and you need more depth. So where you put your weight, this is the stuff I wouldn't necessarily get into with someone that doesn't have balance experience, like it seems like you do. You don't have any depth front to back. So in order to get the hips to do what we want, you kind of want your rear hip, so I'm throwing straight towards the camera, you kind of want your rear hip to have momentum this way, out in front of your toe, and then your front hip is going to have momentum going, not lined up, because those forces would cancel, but with a little bit of offset, so that you get that push-pull, right? Ooh, no, drop a 12-pound ball in the dog. So that you get an offset. If those push and pull are in the same place, nothing moves, right? So to get that rotation, you need an offset. So for getting the hip motion, you kind of want your weight going in front of your toe. For getting the rear leg motion, you kind of want see, it's a lot. Hopefully you're following. You kind of want your hips to continue targetward, which is now behind my plant heel. So if my hips go this way, then the rear foot will continue targetward. So you have to kind of figure out some mental model that works for you to get both of those things to happen at the same time. And stepping off can help. Pre-winding your hips and unwinding can help. There's a lot of different ways to cue it, and it's kind of different for each person. So what we'll do when we get to that point is I'll have you film from behind. I'll watch and see what you're doing and see what cue seems like it's going to be most useful to you. But ultimately, it doesn't matter what your mental cue is. It matters what your body does. So we just need to change the input to get the output we want. And once we have the output we want, it doesn't matter what you're thinking about as long as your body moves right, basically. Okay, moving on. So that's everything I had on your first video. I did watch all of your videos. I'll pop over to the third one and the fourth one for a second to find some points that were visually illustrated better by those videos. But let's pop over to your first back angle. I think it was. Oh no, the one labeled 1. Side angle. Okay. So here the points I had are looking at your leg motion once both feet are down. So right here, boom. And what I'm looking at is so even before that, so as you're setting your plant foot down, your hips start to open up, right? So there's a decent amount of hip rotation happening before your plant. We don't necessarily want that. You don't necessarily need to think about it on that nuanced of a level, but what I'm seeing here, once your plant foot gets down, watch both of the shoes, basically. They both pivot at the same time, right? So here, your front foot isn't pivoting, but it is because you're going from toe down to foot flat. And then same thing happens in reverse on the rear foot. You go from flat to heel up. And as that happens, you pivot on the midfoot of the front leg. So your legs are pivoting at the same time. That is not precisely what we want. So let's pop over to video 4, which illustrates this point pretty well. So kind of looking at your plant foot pivot on this one. I'll pause. Well, I'll let it play through once you can see the whole motion. And then I'll pause for you in frame by frame. So here your foot's down. And then you see how that's it. You're not pivoting on the toe and you're not pivoting on the ball. You're pivoting on the center of your foot. So that tells me for sure that your hips are going up during your rotation. So if I catch just this kind of crease on your pockets, yep, when they come up, it's not a lot. It's not a lot. It's only like 2 inches, but that means the world in disc golf. So your hips are rising during your brace, which will throw off your plane by 2 inches, which actually robs you of a lot of power. Like, it might seem like it doesn't matter that much, but that's what I was talking about when I was holding the stick and having that central pivot that doesn't move at all. That's really important. So that stick rising up, your axis rising up, actually does a lot of damage to your swing plane integrity, which does a lot of damage to your power. So what do we want to see instead? Let's get back to that first clip. And then I'll demo why we don't want both of the legs moving at the same time. So when got dog bags falling out of my pouch. Cool magic trick though. Okay. So what you're getting essentially is you're here setting up and then both legs pivot at the same time. Boom, right? With the hip rise. So here there isn't any containment. There isn't any containment in the back, driving forward. There isn't any containment in the front, driving backwards. So you really want drive from the rear. I need to get a handlebar so that I can like demo this in fake slow-mo. But you want a drive from the rear hip and then a drive from the front hip. So boom, boom, like boom, boom, very quick to each other. It's going to feel like it happens at the same time. But what you're getting instead is they're happening at the same time. And because you don't have any down, but you do have some up, you're getting a lift, right? So you are pivoting around the central axis, but you're not doing it from behind an active brace. You're doing it by floating on top, which means you don't have meaningful ground contact, which means you're kind of just throwing like that, right? We really want to throw boom with compression into and off of the ground. Hopefully that makes sense. If any of this is not clear, ask questions. We can go over more of it in text or in our video checkup. But I'm taking too long. Got to keep moving. Okay. Okay, so the next thing is just your shoulder collapsing. Yes, we can see that in this video. And this is going to be the biggest distance gain for you. Like all the other stuff is like big picture theory stuff. So again, want to make sure I'm clear on this. This foot being in line with the deck boards would be better because it would keep you from turning too far backwards and having this lean in your spine. That lean as you come forward is going to go away because you're going to be leaning towards the camera. It won't look like a lean anymore. And then for most players, it'll be too far forward on the end. You might not do that very badly again. Good balance, but we don't want to set up like this. That's a function of the toe being too far back. So, but looking at swing plane mechanics here. So you come through and then here, this is not ideal. So here's your shoulder line and here's a line that's on your upper arm. So this is too pinched. This angle is not wide enough. And moving forward, because the shoulder is too collapsed, the shoulder is too pinched off, you don't get a deep enough bend in your elbow and your arm kind of comes through all at once. So real quick demo on that one. So and this is covered in the deep pocket video and a little bit in the elbow orientation video. Go over those a little bit in my next point. But basically, your arm is staying in this shape and coming through like this. It's coming through with your body. So same how your head was coming through with your body. If your head stops and your shoulders come through, it allows your arm to get out in front more. And this is really more what we want, right? Again, it's about compression. If I compress my arm movement from here to here instead of from here to here, there's not a lot of power here because my elbow can't really hinge a whole bunch. If you get the elbow in front, then it has all this room to in and out on its own loose, right? So that's kind of the magic maker to this whole form is the elbow hinge. Okay, so next point, and this one's a little convoluted for a first session, but I think we can handle it. Especially because you're on Discord and we can chat all day while I'm at work. So, but it's going to be a little tricky to explain. Do I want to do it from here? Yes, and then I'll pop over to your third video and show you a little bit what I'm talking about there. So your shoulder collapses, right? Your bicep gets too close to your pec. So another way to say that is you're not preserving enough space for your pocket for the disc to come in. But here you're actually doing a relatively advanced technique, the first half of it, because your elbow is set to where it's going to hinge upward. If you were to bend your elbow here, your disc would come up towards your face. Usually at a beginner level, we don't want that because what happens is people pull forward and bend their elbow too much and the disc flares up too close to their face. You're not doing that. You have a little tiny bit of a flare up there, but it's fine. It's not an issue. But then what is an issue is as you come around, so here your shoulder starts to come up, and it should, because your throwing shoulder is lower than your trailing shoulder. You are on a Hyzer lean, and then you kind of stand up out of that a little bit, but you're still on a Hyzer. So your elbow is going to lift towards the end of your swing plane. That is correct. You are setting that part up right. But because of the elbow orientation, your elbow lifts up at a rate where, look at the angle of the disc here, and then in the next frame, no, I lied, 2 frames. So then there, the disc angle has changed significantly. That's because your elbow is lifting up because it's swinging in line with your shoulder plane. So your shoulder plane is low in the front and high in the back because you're on Hyzer. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But as your elbow continues on that plane, the elbow goes up and the hand is still on the lower part of the plane. So the disc flares to match that elbow coming up. And that's why you get a decent amount of wobble coming out, because you've essentially changed the plane the disc is on from this frame to this frame, and it doesn't have enough time to restabilize on the new angle. So the way that we fix that essentially is very confusing, but I'm sure you can do it. So shoulder, internal rotation, external rotation. So external rotation is generally palm up. Internal rotation is generally palm down. So you're setting up here where the disc would go this way. Usually that's a problem. Most of the time we want new players to set up here on a dead flat plane. So their elbow is only ever going to bend on the angle they're going to throw on. You're not doing that. It's fine. The back half is working very well. So you're doing a good job of pulling with the elbow bending a little bit, but not flaring the disc up. It's just a control and balance thing. So you're pulling through here, but then as the elbow goes up, because, right, we're on a Hyzer tilt, so the elbow is low, and then the elbow goes high. As the elbow goes high, it's pulling the disc up with it. So as the elbow goes up, because there's a counterweight here, elbow goes up and shoulder goes into internal rotation a little bit. So you're doing a good job balancing on the back, but then on the front, as the elbow goes up, the disc flares up this way. That's why you're throwing a little bit nose up. That's why your mids tend to go about the same distance as drivers, because mids don't care as much about throwing nose up. Drivers really need to be nose down to get stable and to get their distance, right? So that's what that's about. So the way we fix it is because you are coming into internal rotation, you're essentially flaring the elbow up. You're not flaring it up, it's flaring because of your swing plane, which is correct. You're just countering for that in the back and you're not counting for it in the front. So if you're ending up in too much internal rotation, again, internal, external, this is very confusing until you've done it 500 times. So internal rotation, you're getting too much internal rotation. All you need to do is intentionally add some external rotation at release. So what that looks like is I'm holding a pizza and I'm still holding a pizza, right? That's external rotation. So what it's going to look like is rather than letting my elbow lift up and the disc flare nose up, I'm going to, right as I get to extension, like right about here, I'm going to start rolling. So huge exaggeration. If I'm on a Hyzer tilt, I can still throw an Hyzer, right? I can still throw this way. You can't see the disc because of the light. That's external rotation, right? You don't need that much. All you need is a little tiny boom. So it'll feel like instead of keeping everything rigidly on this plane, right? This looks mechanical. It's a little bit more turn over and let my hands flap out this way. Boom. And it'll feel safer for your elbow because it is safer for your elbow. If you try to extend quickly here, if you go too far, you're going to hyperextend your elbow. But if you turn over a little bit, so snapping out to in front, don't snap to here with your fingers vertical. Snap with your fingers like on a 45 or flat, just to feel it. Like you can put a lot more explosion into it and not be worried about jarring your elbow, right? Here, fingers vertical, you're going to jar your elbow if you're really trying to throw hard. If you put a little bit of turnover, it's fine. It's a lot safer. The other thing that does is if I stay flat, the disc stays flat. If I turn over, it's easier to get the disc a little bit nose down, right? So you can pop and have just that little tiny bit of nose angle. Some physics college level student did a paper. Theoretically, the optimum nose angle for a golf disc is 4 degrees nose down. So like a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, but you don't want it flat. You want it a little tiny bit nose down. Really hard to get there, but even just a little bit of external rotation on your release will counteract the elbow lift that you have. So don't let the elbow lift, let the elbow drop a tiny bit and roll the hand out this way. Boom, little tiny bit. Okay, back to you. We're at 45 minutes already. So maybe I should change how long these are because can't ever do them in 20 minutes. Okay, so that's internal rotation versus external rotation at release. Toes backwards causing a lean, we talked about that. And ground force lifting off at release, we talked about that. So one more thing on this rounding point, and then I will leave you to go throw off of your back deck, figure all this stuff out. So I wanted video 4 for this one. So this one, you put a little more power on it. And we're going to look at what that does to the way you're throwing. So you put more power on it, and what changed? Your angle here is even more collapsed, right? So there's less space in here, and the disc is on your back elbow. So it's like adding power is good, but we need the structure to contain that power, both in the front leg and in the throwing shoulder. So basically what I mean there is, get you links to these. I think the deep pocket and the trebuchet drill will cover this pretty well, but in the interest of completion, so you're putting more power on it, you're getting more hip power, you're getting more shoulder power. So if my shoulders go faster, boom, my disc ends up more behind me. So what you need to balance in addition to that is more framing and more driving the elbow from here, not so much all the way behind you, lawnmower pull, but just driving from here to there with the purpose of having the disc not coming off of this back elbow, right? Here there's no power, but having the elbow out in front and the disc coming off of the elbow. Because here, if my spine is my central axis, the center of gravity of the disc is only like a foot from my spine. So my lever by way of my arm is only about a foot. If I can get out here, support my elbow with shoulder muscle contraction, not just a static pull, but actually driving the elbow forward. Now, from my center to here is a foot and a half. So I get an extra 50% multiplier. And I've compressed into my elbow joint more, so I have more range of motion in my elbow. So I'm going to get more power, and that power is going to be multiplied more by my elbow hinge. Versus here, it's not multiplied hardly at all by my elbow hinge, right? There's a little bit of wrist, but that's about it. Okay, if that's not enough, I don't know what to do. But hopefully all that's clear. Please ask questions if any of it is not. Happy to spend more time with you clearing everything up. But you've got a really good start. You're obviously a very talented athlete. I think you're going to pick this stuff up really quick. It's very smart of you to get some help early, because I know of people, I've worked with people that have been playing this sport for 20 years that don't have a clue on form, and now they have 20 years of bad motor patterns to undo, and you only have a couple of weeks. So I think we can get there really quick. Thank you so much for signing up, and stay in touch. We'll get you figured out. Good luck, sir.